Do you know what? I absolutely love music, but there are some fundamental flaws with the music industry. My guest today is James McAulay, who is founder of the Encore Musicians platform, and he's going to talk about how he's on a personal mission to fix the industry. Plus also give you some great insights on how to lead a successful startup team. Stay right there. That's this week on Create, Reach, Inspire. Hey, it's James here, and I'm joined today by James McAulay, founder and CEO of Encore. He plays the cello, and also he's a technical founder with a degree from Cambridge University in computer science. So first of all, just tell us about your background, how you got started, and also tell us about Encore.
Sure. So when I'm asked this question, I like to go back about 26 years, maybe further than that. My parents met in an orchestra, and so I sort of owe my existence to music, and I was obviously surrounded by music as a child. I started learning the piano when I was 5. My mum tried to teach me piano, but I resisted and didn't want to learn.
Right.
Took up the cello when I was 7 or 8, and then went to a music school when I was a teenager, which involved doing lots and lots of music, studying harmony, studying music theory, singing in choirs, all of that, missing out on lots of parties, just practicing away. And I nearly became a musician. I nearly went to music college to be a professional cellist, and actually decided I wanted to keep music as a very sort of big part of my life, but not the core part of my life.
As a hobby.
Exactly. And so I went to Cambridge to do computer science instead.
So what sparked the interest of computer science? Because I kind of think, is there similarities between musicians and someone who's interested in writing code or computer science?
There's definitely, so I know a lot of musicians who have transitioned from music into programming.
Really?
I think there are similarities. Yeah, you're sort of learning a new language. When you learn music, you're learning to read music, and you're learning to express yourself and create things with a different language. And I think programming gives people a similar sort of sense of like creating things. And there's been a lot of research that's shown that I think people who are musical are often quite good at maths and good numerically. A lot of people think music is extremely creative, and it's all about being arty, and like that is a big part of music, but there's also a very mathematical aspect of music in terms of understanding rhythm, understanding harmony. So yeah, I think they go hand in hand. And how did I get into programming? It's a really good question. I think I was a nerd as a child. I loved video games. I loved the internet. And I think spending so much time on the internet, I just started to wonder, like, how is this made?
How did you build a website?
How do you, if I want to make a website, and I think one of my first websites was like I don't think I've told this story before.
Okay.
I think it was like a leaderboard for Mario Kart time trial.
Right.
Times where me and my friends would just go around the Mario Kart track as fast as possible, and then I just had like a website where we would like put the times up. It's really, really not the coolest website to start with, but it was exciting, and I had an idea, and it was on the internet, and I think it came from just spending so much time online. I wanted to know how people made these things, and I wanted to make things for other people as well. I thought, I get so much joy from some of these great websites and great apps. I want to make them myself.
So tech came about just sort of like in your teenage years before you went off to university, and then it seemed like a good idea, good career option to go to university, do computer science. Would you say that has that helped you in becoming a founder, having that kind of expertise and knowledge of code?
100%.
Yeah.
I think if somebody wants to build a tech startup today, and to be honest, like I think most companies are tech companies in a way. No company is going to exist without a website. I think computer science is one of the best degrees you can study. You can learn it outside of computer science as well. But in terms of my journey, just having the power to create something in your mind is incredibly freeing and liberating. And I know so many people who have ideas and are trying to find someone else who can build it for them. Like, I hear every week someone looking for a technical co-founder, or looking to hire a freelance programmer, or, looking for a CTO. And I think everyone in the world...
Everyone's got a great idea.
Everyone's
for an
got
app,
that idea.
They?
Everyone's got an idea. And I guess one of the differences is that there are people who can go and make it themselves. And yeah, doing computer science just set me up so well for understanding how the internet works and how to build websites well. And also the course it's quite rigorous, so it gets you thinking in quite a structured and a disciplined way. The approach to problem solving is fantastic. You know, the number of times at uni I was just banging my head against a brick wall trying to figure out a problem. That's a useful skill to have, that perseverance when you are, you know, building a business and you're trying to solve problems for a long time.
Okay, so let's talk about Encore. You started in September 2014. Tell me about what it looked like in the early days.
Sure. So the original idea for Encore was almost like LinkedIn for musicians. We thought LinkedIn doesn't work for performing musicians. SoundCloud and Spotify exist if you've got recorded music, but if you're a performing musician, you want somewhere to like connect with other musicians and sort of showcase yourself. And so it started out as a network for musicians, but the goal was always to get those musicians more paid work. And so we spent the first year recruiting musicians. We were exclusive to the UK music colleges, so we basically emulated Facebook's approach, you know, going campus to campus. You had to have, for example, an RCM email address to get in when we launched at RCM, and so there was an air of exclusivity, which made it more appealing to musicians.
Did that work then?
It worked so well. Yeah. It helped.
It's interesting because I've always wondered. I signed up to Facebook when you had to be at university to do it, and I thought that was really cool at the time. And then when it sort of opened up to the general public, and that was probably like halfway through my degree, I was a bit like, oh no, you know, like, it's this cool little underground club you're in.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, I'm surprised I've not seen it done more often since. Really,
it worked really well for a number of reasons. You know, we were building as we launched. So like, every time we launched at a new like music college, the website had come on, you know, leaps and bounds in the last few weeks. And these musicians were finding bugs. They were suggesting how the website could be better, and it just meant that we didn't sort of launch publicly until we really felt ready that like we had a product that we could show off to the public. So it was great for us in terms of like getting lots of feedback. I think musicians enjoyed, exactly as you said, feeling part of an exclusive community, and it meant actually we had like almost like a waiting list of people who weren't at music college who were like I remember getting angry messages from musicians, and they were like, why won't you let me in?
Really?
Like yeah, they were
Fantastic.
like, this is elitist, this isn't fair, and I said, like, we are going to launch this publicly. We want you to be on it as well. We're just taking this approach to like give ourselves a bit more time, and it meant when we opened the doors, the floodgates opened. So yeah, I think it's a great strategy for us launching.
I think that's a great lesson in marketing generally. If you've got people that are angry because they can't get access to a product, you're onto a good thing. So how did the transition happen? Because obviously the platform now is very, very different to when you launched, by the sounds of it.
Sure. So the transition happened, I'd say, for a couple of reasons. One reason was that when we went round these music colleges and we sort of pitched this network, the reaction was generally positive, but it was, this sounds interesting. Like, yeah, I'll sign up. That sounds I'm curious. But it wasn't something that people were sort of like dying to use. And actually one of my team, Joel, often has the phrase, are we offering people a painkiller or a vitamin? And I think when we had a network, it was a bit of a vitamin. It was like, that was a nice idea. Like, I might sign up. And then when we changed the pitch and we said, this is a place where customers come to the site asking for musicians and you can reply to them and they will pay you good money to go and perform. Suddenly it's a painkiller. Suddenly, every musician wakes up in the morning and is like, where is my next gig coming from? Where's my next check coming from? And as soon as we changed that pitch, the demand from musicians was so much more visceral.
I guess the positive is you already had a customer base as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one reason. It was just we realised that the network, and we realised ourselves, the network was kind of interesting. The marketplace was extremely useful. The other thing was, we were fundraising at the time and we were thinking, how is this going to be a business? How are we going to make money? And with a network, is it advertising? Like, I didn't want to build a website just making money from ads. Is it membership? I don't know if it's membership. And then when we thought, if we only make money when two people transact and we charge a commission, that's a good business model. That's a proven business model. Airbnb, Etsy, eBay. If you connect a buyer and a seller and you take a small cut of their transaction, you win when your customers and your suppliers win. And those two things happened, like in the summer after we'd launched, and we realised the marketplace really was the product that had to be built, and the network, though interesting, was, I guess, how we seeded the marketplace.
So that was about 2 years after launch, so sort of 2016, was it?
Oh, it was about a year after we launched when we raised our first round of investment, and it was around that time, every day investors were like, how are you going to make money? How much money are you going to make? And I gradually realised, it is the marketplace.
Did you have to refine your pitch then as you were kind of going round?
Yeah. I remember so we graduated from Entrepreneur First, and we had pitched at Demo Day, and there were 200 investors there, and we had a good amount of interest. But the first meeting we had, it was with one of the best VC firms in London. Like, I really shouldn't have had that as my first meeting. And we went in, and we were sort of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and we were like, this is Encore, it's great. And the meeting turned from a pitch of our company to this VC into the VC giving us a workshop in how to talk to investors, which was incredibly helpful. I
suppose that's useful coming from one of the best VC firms
it was.
in London,
it was great advice. And he was, he was at the whiteboard, and he was showing us, like, this is the sort of traction you want to have, and here's how you should approach these meetings. Really helpful, but it also shows that we knew nothing going into our first meeting.
Here's some advice. Now F off and come back in a year's time.
Exactly. Yeah. So the pitch evolved. I'd say the pitch evolved after every single meeting. Someone asks you a question that you don't have a good answer to.
Have you ever been back to that guy since then?
I have. Yeah, I've met with him, and it was much better.
Right, good.
And I'm hoping to speak to him again soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
So, you get a question, you don't know how to answer it, you go away and you figure out a better answer, and it's a totally iterative process, pitching.
So, fast forward to sort of present day then, what excites you about your business currently, and what do you think your opportunities are at the moment?
Sure. So I'm excited about a lot of things with our business.
Good.
I'm probably slightly biased. What am I sort of most excited about at the moment? I think I'm most excited about us moving towards having real-time availability from our musicians, and moving from a platform where a customer says, I'm looking for a string quartet for my wedding, and then within 10 minutes they'll get a reply, like a personalised reply saying, hi, we're free and we charge £900. Moving away from that slightly manual process to a customer coming to our website and seeing 5 string quartets who are all free on the day of their wedding, and they've got exact prices, and we want to get to a point where you can instant book if you want to.
So it's providing tools for the musicians to manage their diaries, basically.
Exactly. And the feedback from musicians we get is, I like responding to these customer requests, but as Encore's become more popular, there are so many requests. Musicians are spending a few hours a week replying to these messages, and if they spent 5 minutes a week updating their calendar and just checking their prices were correct, the dream for us really is that a musician wakes up, looks at their phone, and they're like, oh, I've been booked, and they did nothing. And right now they still have to do a little bit of legwork to get the gigs, and we want to basically become their automated agent that just tells them, you're booked for this gig, you're booked for this gig. So I find that incredibly exciting.
Cool. Okay. And I've noticed that a lot of your team have got musical backgrounds. So when you hire people, is that important to you?
It's incredibly important. Our team don't need to be musicians. You don't need to play an instrument to join Encore, but you do need to care about music. And I'll actually share one of my favorite interview questions, and if anyone's applying to Encore in the future, then now you know one of the questions. I ask people about the last gig they went to.
Right.
I just say, instead of the question I used to ask, which was, tell me about your relationship with music, and everyone's like, I love listening to music, and I listen to music all the time, and I like all types of music, which tells you nothing. I instead say, what was the last gig you went to? And the people that we've hired are the people who say, it was 2 weeks ago and it was absolutely incredible, and let me tell you about it, or it's actually tomorrow and it's very recent, and they really care about it. The people that don't get past that stage in the interview process are the people who say, oh, it was I think it was 2 years ago, and who was it? It might have been, I think it was at Wembley. I can't really remember who it was, but it was really good. I really enjoyed it. And you just know that they don't really care about live music, and the people who care are the ones who are going out and supporting artists. So you don't need to be a musician to work at Encore, but you need to care about music, and that's one of the ways that we check.
Absolutely. And this is funny because when we interview people, they've either got to have an interest in radio or podcasting, and
sure.
What's one of the questions, and we've had people who've come along and said, what's your favourite podcast? Oh, I don't really listen to podcasts. Especially if they're coming to work for a podcast company.
I'm surprised by people like that. It's
amazing.
Did you not do your research?
I think the thing is, though, it's quite often when you put job ads out there. People just go down the list, just clicking apply, and you just, you need to find good staff who are really passionate about, your sort of industry as well as actually what they're hired to do.
100%.
All right, so let's move on. I'm interested because it says, one of your kind of missions is you think the music industry is broken. I suppose probably because of the S word, streaming, and also that you want to try and fix it. So I'm kind of intrigued to know what your thoughts are on the state of the music industry in 2019/2020.
It's a great question. It's a big question. Fundamentally, I think artists are undervalued, and there are so many incredible artists out there who just aren't earning what they should, considering when
it's been like their life's work.
Exactly.
You said for you, you started from an early age, your parents are in music, it's obviously something that's so close to your heart.
Exactly, and that was one of the reasons for starting Encore. Was I was at university and I was thinking about my sort of future career prospects, and I to be honest, I thought, I have a computer science degree, I'm probably going to be fine. I'd meet with friends who were studying to be professional musicians, and they were like, they had no idea where the gigs were going to come from after they graduated. How do you go from being a student in music college to being a freelancer and getting gigs? So that was one of the motivations. And I think one of the problems that we're trying to address is musicians being underpaid or even exploited in the music industry, either by customers who have no idea what things actually cost, or there are agencies out there who will rip off musicians either by charging huge commissions, or even not telling the musician how much the customer is paying. Prime example of this is I know an agent, and they represent quite a few different DJs, and each of those DJs has a typical gig price. Let's say their price for a corporate event is they want to earn £700 to go out and do an all-night set. The agent might find out, however, that a huge corporate company have got a budget of £2,000 for live music, and so that agent charges say 1,900 or 2,000, but only gives 700 to the DJ because they know that the DJ is happy with 700, and they've just pocketed 1,300. And I remember hearing that and just being flabbergasted by that. So I just think, I think musicians, it's difficult being a musician, and when you book a musician to perform, you're not just paying for the 2 hours that they play, you're paying for all the practice that has gone into getting them to that point, the travel time, the cost of keeping their instruments, buying new instruments. And
I guess also the kind of personalised service, the fact they're tailoring that, that set to you.
100%.
Whether or not it's a DJ or a musician, it's the same thing, really. They're creating something that's unique for your event, which I think has a lot of value. But it's, you don't just turn up and kind of make it up as you go along. You've got to plan this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the powers we have as a marketplace, and almost as a sort of micro economy in the music industry, is that we can help musicians set their prices. And so when we first started Encore, it was a bit of a free market. Musicians could charge whatever they wanted. So let's say someone comes along and says, I want a singer to come and perform at my party. Most professional singers would say, okay, it's 2 hours, it's central London. It should cost them anywhere from £250 to maybe £350, depending on how good I am and how far I'm travelling. We then might see a student who comes along and says, I'll do it for 50 quid. And the customer sees £50 and is like, wow, what a bargain, books the student. And then the professionals are just really annoyed and they're like, this person's just undercut us. And they're also dragging the prices down in the whole industry. So Encore was a free market, and we just saw so many problems with that pretty quickly we implemented minimum fees. And we said to our musicians, this is the lowest price that a customer can enter as their budget, and this is the lowest price that you can charge for this type of gig, and you cannot go below that. And that had a huge impact. And over the last 3-4 years, I think the average fee earned by a musician after our commission has increased from about something like 80 or 90 pounds when we first started 3 or 4 years ago. It's now something like £205 per musician after our commission. So we've managed to more than double the amount musicians are earning, and that's one of the sort of benefits of being the marketplace. You can sort of you create the rules, and we think that musicians as a collective just need to really value themselves and know what they're worth, because you can't have a race to the bottom. You can't have sort of amateur or inexperienced musicians dragging prices down.
I think also for consumers who are looking at booking a musician, maybe have never done so before, there's a piece on your website which I was reading and I thought was really good, what can I expect to pay? because, you know, as Joe blogs, you know, let's say I'm booking a musician for a corporate event or a wedding or whatever, you're not going to necessarily know what you should actually expect to pay. And I think actually having that information available is going to be really useful for people planning, say, a wedding and
Definitely.
trying to budget and everything. So, you know, there's I presumably use content as kind of part of your strategy to you know, get people in and get bookings in for your kind of customers.
Yeah, and that price question is one of the biggest and one of the first questions people ask. I think if we went out onto the street now and we asked, you know, 10 people, how much does a 5-piece wedding band cost for a wedding, you know, in July, we'd get a range of prices.
Yeah.
And no one really knows. And so we try to educate our customers. We try to just give them realistic expectations. So we, on the bottom end, we're saying, look, you really shouldn't be spending less than X amount. If you do, it's probably an amateur band or students, and you may be taking a risk. Also, you probably shouldn't spend more than this much, or you're being taken for a ride and ripped off. You know, like, the band might be incredible, but unless they've got like a celebrity rock star frontman, you shouldn't be spending more than, you know, this much money. And yeah, customers really appreciate that.
If you're enjoying this episode and you want to get behind the scenes clips plus lots of additional content, make sure you hit me up on Instagram. It's at Create Reach Inspire, and also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can just search for James Mulvaney, and I'm also on Twitter as well. All the details on your screen now, or if you can't see them on your screen because you're listening on podcast form, just type it into Google and it will come up. So let's get back to this week's episode of the podcast. Yeah, but I guess also, I suppose it depends on how often, you know, if their schedules are full every summer, then you would put your prices up. You know,
oh,
naturally.
Definitely. Like, we charge commission. We want musicians to charge as much as possible,
Yeah.
but we never, what we talk about with pricing is we never want a customer to tell a friend, I booked through Encore and it cost this, and have their friend say, what? That's, you know, that's way too expensive. We never want a customer to, you know, have been ripped off. So as a marketplace, we're trying to balance both these forces. We're trying to earn as much money as possible for the musicians, but we're trying to get the best deal possible for our customers. And that's just a balance that we're constantly trying to strike.
Got it. Okay, so what advice would you give to someone who's looking to start a career as a musician?
As a musician?
You know, like if you're starting out from scratch, maybe you've just been through music school, or you know, you've gone and done a degree in music or whatever. So, or even like, you know, what was your advice to getting started?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
So I think if you want to, so I'll talk about the types of working musicians that we work with. So all my experience basically is in private events, corporate events, functions, weddings, that type of performer. I can't speak so much to, you know, being an originals artist, but some of what I'm about to say does apply. One of the first things a musician needs to do is record really good videos. You know, it's unlikely that when someone books you, they'll be able to come and hear you live. So the only thing they're making their decision on really is the quality of your video.
Do you know what? That's a really interesting answer. That wasn't an answer I was going to expect. I was expecting actually. So
So if you have like 2 or 3 songs that are like polished and ready, go out and get them recorded and filmed well. We've heard this so many times from musicians who have said, you know, I had a video shot on my iPhone and it was okay, and then I went and got a decent showreel made, and now I'm getting all these bookings. And it's because customers, when they book you, they want to feel they're paying for a professional. And if your videos don't look professional, you don't look like you take yourself seriously.
And you need good sound in the video as well, especially if you don't shoot it on an iPhone. It sounds horrible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the best things a musician can do. Then you want to build up your set list. So customers want to see, like, ideally hundreds of songs they can choose from. You know, they want their first dance song. They want to know that like all the favorites are going to be in there. So you got to build up your repertoire. And then after that, it's really just a case of performing as much as you can. I think Ed Sheeran talks about this. You know, he was doing like pub gigs every single night, and it just refined his act, and he got so comfortable on stage, and he thrived on stage. And I'd say to musicians, you know, if you're not getting the private bookings yet, just find the pub that will have you play. Don't play for free. That undervalues yourself, and people will hear that you cost very little money. Charge like a fair fee. But yeah, just go out and get that performing experience. And I think this applies to being an entrepreneur as well, but with every single customer, try and get feedback from them. So try and get like a review or a testimonial, and B, try and get a referral from them. If you can turn every booking into another booking, you've got a viral business. So yeah, that would be for someone who wants to break into this sort of type of performing that we deal with. Get a good video shot, build up your set list, and like really sort of just perform. Don't spend all your time in your bedroom practicing. Try and spend as much time as possible on stage, like developing your sort of charisma and your show.
I think this is like, I've got this written down here saying important sort of storytelling. It's becoming a bit of a cliche word, storytelling now, but I think it is important. And I've got it for startup founders, but even for musicians, it's basically what you've just described. I think, having, the videos adds to the story. Your experience, if you've gone and done, like you said with Ed Sheeran, that's his makeup, that's his story.
That's like his mythos. People
exactly.
love that sort of that origin story.
Cool. Okay. So moving on to some other stuff. So what do you think about podcasting as a tool potentially for musicians to get their work out there?
I have not thought about that before. I think that is, I run a podcast myself. Like, one of the challenges is finding like good introduction music. I think, if a musician was savvy and they found like the right podcast with the right audience, it could be a great tool for distribution. I think, as a musician, you want to think about who your audience is. So if you're trying to break into the music industry, you probably don't want to go and focus on, a yoga podcast or get your music played on like a programming podcast. But if you can find a way of getting yourself on a music industry podcast, I think yes, I hadn't considered that. I think podcasting is blowing up as well, isn't it? You know that
absolutely.
more than I do. And so if you can sort of jump on the hype train, definitely do.
Here's an idea. If there's tons of podcasts out there, so say for example for brides to be who are booking, looking at creating weddings, try and get featured on some podcasts that are relevant to your target market.
Absolutely.
As a musician.
And there are lots of wedding podcasts out there already.
And I think that's a really good tip for sort of musicians who, again, adds to the story, adds to credibility, massively. All right, so best piece of advice that you've received business-wise?
That is a very good question.
I know you said you wanted to talk about this. So
I did. And you know what? I couldn't settle on like one piece of advice. I would say, I'd say our investors over the last 4 or 5 years have just given us so much valuable advice, and I've learned so much from them. They are mostly people who've run businesses before. They've made mistakes, they've achieved incredible things, and that's been so helpful for me. I think one of the sort of pieces of advice I find myself thinking about a lot is actually from a book, and it's a book called High Output Management by Andy Grove, who was the CEO of Intel. Now, you look at this book on the cover and it doesn't look that exciting. You start reading it, it's quite dry, but it's honestly the best book on management I've ever read. And he has... I
love how you've read a book on management. So for someone who's, creative and musician.
Oh, yeah. I could talk about management for days. I mean, a few years ago, I realised I was not a good manager, and I had this sort of epiphany, and it was uncomfortable, and it was difficult, and I just read everything I could, and I focused on being a good manager. And instead of trying to get things done myself, I tried to enable my team to do their best work. And the company that we run now is so different to the company that we were running 3 years ago when I wasn't a good manager. Anyway, so this book, High Output Management, he talks about a lot of things. He talks about how to motivate your best employees, how to do performance reviews, how to think of your business and optimize it. But he has this whole section on one-on-one meetings. And we were already doing one-on-one meetings before I read this book. So every 2 weeks, meet with one of our direct reports and we'd have a chat. Before I read this book, I'd basically have a chat and, catch up with them, and it might be 10, 15 minutes. I'd be like, cool, let's go back to work. And he says, these meetings are so important. This is when people can really open up to you. You should allow your employee to totally set the agenda. And if there's no agenda, I have like a sort of list of questions that I just like to ask every couple of weeks. And employees just appreciate so much that time to speak like openly and honestly, in depth, about how they're feeling. Like, are they motivated? Are they starting to sort of lose motivation a little bit? How can we bring that back? And something else that I took from that book as well is that these meetings are like, they should be sacred. Like, you shouldn't be missing them, which we would sometimes before I read this book. They should start on time. You should show your employees that you take this time seriously and that you respect it. And I do these one-on-ones every 2 weeks, and I learn so much from my team, and I feel like I really have like a good pulse on the company now because we do those. So the best piece of advice I think was to really take one-on-ones seriously.
Interesting. So, well, yeah, I don't consider myself a good manager. I consider myself a good leader.
Okay.
But I'm very lucky that I've got 3 really good managers who work alongside me, in the business. And my CTO introduced these one-on-ones. It wouldn't surprise me if he's read the same book as you, because he introduced these, I think maybe 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. And he swears by them. And we've recently, our CMO has now rolled them out for marketing. So he started doing one-on-ones as well. And he's already said, he's seen a real big benefit. So there's obviously something there. I'm really intrigued to know now if it's the same book, but
it could well be.
Yeah,
could well be.
But I think it's interesting as well, because I think it's definitely, as a startup founder, you have to, it's certainly in the early days, you have to kind of manage your team. But I think now I kind of very much see myself more as like a leader. I'm trying to just, like, focus on the bigger vision. But ultimately as well, I'm always, my door's always open. I'm happy to speak to anyone. So yeah, this is a good point. But that's very good business advice then. So what would you say the sort of top 3 traits of an entrepreneur would be in your eyes?
That's also a very good question. I think a great entrepreneur is able to focus with sort of laser intensity on what really matters. The challenge of being an entrepreneur and running a company is that there are always 100 things demanding your attention, and there are always 100 things you could be doing, and your time is so valuable. Like as the entrepreneur, as the CEO or sort of C-level person in a company, how you spend your time is critical. So I think one of the key traits is just being able to focus and prioritize and know what to focus on. I think as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to attract incredible people. You need to be able to keep them at your company. You need to be able to motivate them. I think, I mentioned a few years ago, I had this sort of epiphany where I realized I'm a bad manager, and I spent a long time getting myself to a position where I feel much better about it, and I am better at it.
Yeah.
And I think
so being self-critical is important then as well.
It is, yeah. And I think I had this realization where I needed to focus on the people in the business much more. I'd been a little bit sort of I'd just been a little bit oblivious. I'd been like in my own sort of like work, trying to get stuff done myself, and slightly oblivious to some of the problems that were around me. And I think if you're a good entrepreneur, you need to be able to like attract the best possible people. You need to sell these people on the dream, on the vision, and then you need to keep them. And we've gotten really good at that recently. None of our full-time team have left since May last year. We keep people in this organization, and we sort of like encourage them to develop themselves, and we know how to motivate people. So I think that's really important, like the people skills. And then finally, you mentioned it a couple of minutes ago, like storytelling. As an entrepreneur, you are constantly weaving a story to investors, or to the press, or to someone you're trying to hire, or to your customers, or it's all a story. And as human beings, like, we love stories. We don't like chaos. We don't like randomness. We love a nice narrative that sort of falls into place and makes sense. And if you as an entrepreneur can tell this really compelling story and get people on board with your journey, I think you will go quite far with that skill. Okay, brilliant. Thanks a lot, James. Been a pleasure to speak to you. Cool, thank you very much. I think we've discussed some really interesting stuff. Yeah, thanks for having me. Okay, no problem. So thanks for listening to this week's episode. To get the latest episode directly to your favourite podcast app, please remember to subscribe to the podcast. Just search for it on Spotify or Apple Music. We're on all of the major podcast platforms and apps. Did you know you can also follow me on Instagram at Create, Reach, Inspire for lots of latest information and tips and tricks, plus also behind the scenes content of making this podcast. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please remember to hit that like button and write us a review, or if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn at James Mulvaney. Thanks for watching, take care, and have a great day.